Howdy everyone, it's the fourth judge here, and today we're going to go through a UFC 330. We'll start with the opening of the main card, and then we'll finish off with the main event, which was Garry versus Makhachev. All right, let's get underway. So first up, we have Edson Barboza versus Esteban Ribovic. So yeah, looks like it was Barboza's last fight, and man, it was similar to the past few. Just a pure beatdown, man. A little sad to see, I'm not gonna lie. 70 of the strikes landed for Ribovic. Like almost all the strikes landed came in round one. Especially for Barboza. I think like 24 of his 30 came in round one. He had a huge gash on his leg, and then going into round two, he just could not make it. He was out of there. Man, 132 left in round two. But yeah, just a complete beatdown. I will say though, Ribovic does get touched a lot. He's a little sloppy with his striking defense, given I think he was a little eager to get this done. It's old man Barboza. He wants to bounce back from that Gamrot loss, but nonetheless, what do you see from this one, man?
Yeah, we were kind of talking while this was going on, talking about, like we were saying, how Ribovic obviously got the one here, but almost looked a little bit sloppy. And it's one of those, is that him as a fighter, or was he just completely overlooking Barboza as a threat? So I think the next fight will be kind of a good tell on what Ribovic is going to kind of show. Are we going to see that same sloppiness that he showed in this fight, or is he going to kind of tone it in when it's maybe more of a threat in his eyes?
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree I loved Barboza, watched his entire career in the UFC really. And, it was, unfortunately, we see it a lot where these guys stick around probably a little bit too long. He did go out, kind of on his shield. He didn't take the easy way out and go out on his chair or nothing like that after that round one. Hopefully him and his family are just gonna have a happy retirement, that kind of stuff. Go off into the sunset, maybe open up his gym and that kind of stuff.
Nice. All right. Next up, we have Dustin Stoltzfus versus Mansour Abdul Malik. Man, do I have egg on my face, man? I sat there trashing Dustin Stoltzfus before the fight, but man, was this so much fun to watch. Coming in there, if you guys haven't seen Mansour Abdul Malik, his legs are like tree trunks, man. They're gigantic. Just a very intimidating looking guy, and swings heavy. And I think he came in here thinking, I'm just going to tap this guy on the nose and he's going lights out. And Stoltzfus is not letting that happen. He did a really good job of getting up in Mansour's face, so he couldn't really just swing those wild hooks. And he just mauled him on the ground, man. It was great to watch. You saw, I think they kept referring to it as like blue collar fighting. You just saw that grit fighting from Dustin. So when he had Mansour on the ground, he was putting his knee into his ribs. He was putting his knee like on his head, on his neck, making him uncomfortable and wearing him out early. And then ended up getting him out of there, round two submission. I think Abdul Malik was like a minus 500 or something. Wild, man. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I was right there with you. We both kind of were talking about Malik in this one. You can kind of see down there on the bottom, it was a minus 700 for Malik, plus 500 for Dustin into that. And I'm sure the submission win for Dustin was even higher of a plus money. And I mean, like you said, Dustin just made it his fight. He was someone who didn't overlook this person, knew that this person was a threat. And I think Malik did kind of what Ribovic did. He went, I'm going to knock this guy out in round one. I don't have to worry about him at all. Dustin took control. He put the fight where he wanted the fight to be and just outclassed Malik. It was a really fun fight to watch.
Yes.
Definitely was one of those, damn, I eat my words here, because we did not see it going this way, but it was a great fight to watch. I'm not going to be upset if I get a pick wrong if it's a badass fight.
Yep, 100%. 100%. And I think the odds, I somewhere on the UFC broadcast, it was like plus 2,700 for Stoltzfus submission. So yeah, hopefully someone made some bank. But next up, we have Jalen Turner versus Cal Fernandez. Man, I kind of expected Jalen Turner to get through this one, but I think he performed a hell of a fraud check on Cal Fernandez. Not too much to talk about. As you see, this finished really, really quick. But essentially what happened is Cal did some lazy spinning attack, and Jalen caught him right in the middle of that wobbled him and set him down and just beat the brakes off of him on the ground. It took maybe, I think, like 4 or 5 strikes on the ground. He was out, man. Great bounce back for Turner. And I agree. I think he needs to get someone maybe ranked 14, 15, get him back in there. It's time. He's not the rising prospect he was when he first came into the sport, but he could be a great journeyman. 99% of the time, he is having great fights. What do you think, man? What did you see?
Yeah, this is, I feel like, one of those cliche Turner fights where it was who's going to turn up, and it was the Jalen of, yesteryear that we're used to seeing, where it was, he walked in, he went, hey, this is going to be my fight, and I'm going to show you why I'm here. And then that was the end of it. And sometimes we get that kind of Jalen turn up, and sometimes we don't get that Jalen. So It was nice seeing him jump back on the win train. It was kind of funny hearing Aljo talk. They were mentioning how Aljo was saying that this is going to be like the next king of Brazil coming in, and then just gets flatlined in 40 seconds. It was one of those terrible knockouts where he was stunned on the ground and then back of the head is bouncing off the canvas to completely knock him out. So, I want to see what he does when Fernandez does when he comes back. But like you said, great win for Turner. Give him someone, like you said, 15, 14, someone in that low ranking. See what he can do there. Maybe he kind of rides around that 10 to 15 for the next few years. And if he does, then cool. I think he's a good fighter, and he would be kind of a good journeyman, even though he's a little bit younger. Calling him a journeyman is a little weird, but like he's good enough for prospects to show, hey, I'm better, but he's not going to be good enough to really, he's not going on a title run or nothing like that anytime soon. 100%. So,
yeah. And I saw a lot of conversation prior to this about people talking about, I can't pick Turner, he's a quitter. It's like, yeah, man, if you compared him to someone like Dan Hooker, he looks like a quitter. Dan Hooker's mentally unstable. That man's going in there going, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard to make those comparisons on calling him a quitter when it's like he's had tough fights. He is used to getting guys out of there in the beginning. But just because you can't stay in there with Dan Hooker's a tough dude, man. So, yeah, just like you said, man, I'm excited to see what's next for Turner. But next up, we have our co-main event, Mackenzie Dern versus Jillian Robertson. Very standard women's fight. And I think that hurts me because we saw a banger women's fight last card, like the opener, I believe. So this was, just a little disappointing. Jillian really cannot strike at all. She's throwing like little paws, can't really get anything. Round 5 had success there, but I don't really know what was going on. And, a big thing everyone's talking about, and you're even talking about in the middle of the fight, is what is Dean Thomas doing? Like, the advice is, we need to wait for her to make a mistake, get her in the corner. It's like, Dern is really doing everything. You kind of need to risk something here, and that was not the instruction from her corner. So, very boring fight, unanimous decisions, total strikes. It's hard to call those strikes because, man, I would cut that in half or something, because like none of those were really landing anything. Or I guess the significance, 65-49, I think it was more like 20-10, man. Those strikes were not significant. Good for Dern, but besides that, man, this strawweight is in a rough shape until Zhang Weili comes back. What do you think, man?
Yeah, it was kind of like what you were mentioning there. That 4-0 fight last week was one of those banger women's fights that we just don't get very often. And I did see a lot of people talking shit about this fight. And being someone who has a little bit more of like a jiu-jitsu background, I enjoyed the fight. The fight was a technical fight. It was better than a lot of the women's fights that we end up seeing. It wasn't a finish, and we did kind of get spoiled this night with just back-to-back finishes. There was only like, 3 out of the 14 fights or whatever that night that went to a decision. So we got kind of spoiled, and maybe we were looking for like a Dern for a submission or something like that, but it was a good fight. Dern showed some really good improvement in her striking, which we knew she was practicing, and she has shown improvement already. But I think this fight, again, just kind of solidified that her striking is looking better. She had decent takedowns. Her submission was there. Jillian is a great person on the ground. So for Dern to kind of outclass someone who, coming into this, that's what everyone was talking about, was, Jillian's going to be the biggest the biggest threat on the ground that Dern's really ever fought, and then just outclassed her for 5 rounds, basically. Like, I think that kind of shows that Dern is a higher level than kind of these other competitions coming up. Now, I do agree with you when I say I don't think Dern is going to have as easy of a time when Zhang Weili comes back. So I do think that this is almost kind of a, hey, keep my belt warm for when Weili's back.
Yeah.
But I think that this was a really good showing for Dern. I was happy with her turnout here. I think that she can basically do the same kind of thing for most of these women lined up behind her, and then it just makes me more intrigued to see when Weili gets back.
Yeah, 100%. The only thing I'm going to disagree on, hated the fight. Boring. Hated it. But I'm picky. I'm not into that jiu-jitsu stuff as much. But nonetheless, let's wrap this up. Our main event, we have the welterweight champion and still Islam Makhachev versus Ian Machado Garry. Man, I mean, really, really good showing from Garry. I think some just dumb decisions there at the end cost him, getting caught in that body triangle in round 5. Man, once Islam has that body triangle, if you're taller than him, you're not getting out. Someone like Volk, where you can kind of squirm, he has a low center of mass. I think he can kind of work his way out. But someone like we saw with JDM, someone like Ian Garry, you're not getting out of it. You're stuck in there. But prior to that, man, really good showing from Ian Garry, especially round 3. Round 3, he looked like a totally different fighter. Came out there, looked comfortable, was landing good strikes. Good win from Islam Makhachev. In my opinion, I think he's the GOAT. But I will say I'm a bit disappointed with this welterweight run. I think he has like a combined 50 strikes in his 2 welterweight fights. So it's boring. It's not fun to watch. That's what I liked about Islam at lightweight is that, dude, this guy's going to stand and bang a little bit. Yes, he's going to take you down and seal alpha around if he needs to, but he's going to stand and bang. Welterweight's just too dangerous to stand and bang for him. It makes sense, but, it comes at a cost of fun, and I get it. Some people want legacy over fun, and that's fine, but it's not going to stop me from talking about it. I prefer someone who is going to risk it. It makes me appreciate guys like Ilia Topuria, Justin Gaethje, the guys that are going to lay it all out on the line just to entertain us and hopefully get the win and cement their legacy. But nonetheless, this still cemented Islam probably as the GOAT for me. Defending both belts multiple times, good win for him. But like we said, very good showing from Garry. Just needed to do a little bit more in that round 5. I don't know how it was scored 4-1. I had it 2-2 going into 5 or going into the 5th. But what do you think, man? What did you see?
Yeah, I think that this was one of those best case scenario for Garry. Obviously best case scenario would have been a win, but if you're gonna lose, showing what he did, it was, other than Volk 1, this is probably the most competition that Islam has shown versus someone in the UFC. So I think that this showed that Garry had much better grappling defense and ground game that I kind of gave him credit for.
Yep.
I talked about seeing it with the Shavkat fight, but Islam and Shavkat are different breed as well. So I think that this showed that Ian is a monster on defensive wrestling and ground game as well. It was a good win for Islam. Like you said, it's a little bit more of boring wins, but it's also what he needs to do. He's not going to go out there and say, hey, I'm going to abandon my best traits to try to cement my legacy, as much as us as fans and watchers might want to see, just stand up, bang, fight kind of thing. He's doing what he should do as someone who's going to make, twice as much money if he gets the win tonight, cement his like all this kind of stuff. He called out Carlos, and not necessarily called out, but when he was on the booth after the fight, he said that Carlos is probably his next person. He just didn't really think that Morales had fought enough recently to kind of get the next shot. I like the Carlos fight. I'm a big fan of Carlos. I don't think Carlos is as good on the ground as Ian, but I also think Carlos has much more kind of one-touch knockout power. And I mean, look at Islam's face at the end of the fight there. Islam was the fighter who had more damage showing on his face. If Carlos can land a nice clean shot that Garry might have gotten off, Carlos could put him asleep. So, I think that that's going to be one of those, again, Islam's going to come out and go, all right, I need to take this guy down because he's much more dangerous on the feet. But Carlos, if he can stay up at all and land a nice shot, I think Carlos probably has the best chance on the feet versus Carlos and Ian. I think Carlos could knock out Islam more than Ian could. Good win for Islam, though. I don't want to take anything away from his win. He did exactly what he needed to do. He showed why he is the GOAT right now. It's, he's showing, and hopefully it just kind of keeps riding that. Let him get to a 20-fight win streak, taking over the welterweight division, get some more, significant wins maybe. Maybe if he can get a finish on Prates and then a finish on Morales, then I don't even think it's like questionable. People might start to argue, Jones, blah, 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 and, Silva had more finishes and blah, blah, blah. But if Islam can come out and get some finishes on these next contenders, I don't even think there's a question that anybody can argue that he's the GOAT.
Yeah, 100%. Me personally, I hope someone drops him dead in that octagon, man. I do not want to see him fight anymore. I'm done with welterweight Islam. But yeah, if he can get some finishes, man, that does help him a lot. It kind of bounces him back. But yeah, guys, nonetheless, I think that's our recap. We'll have a video for this week's fights coming out like always on Thursday. Keep your eye out. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on Thursday.